And we are up and running. I was going to tweet this out before I got it up and running. Good job, me. A couple retweets first. Oh, hey. Phone's letting me know that I'm live. And let me find Nerdologists here quickly. Tweeting out live stream info on my Twitter account, but also tweeting out article I put up today. About characters. Let me actually hop over here. Pop up game show again. I'm really dark. Webcam. It doesn't keep this setting for some reason. Right. This is not auto. I want it like there. Kept some of the other changes I made. There we go, much better, and it's live. Okay, so we're back again. So as I was saying, two things I retweeted. One was for the stream, the other one being for the article I put up today. I've been doing a series on running better game sessions, and today's was, instead of being for the dungeon master, it was for the players. Like how, when I'm a dungeon master, this is kind of what I look for from players. I want and expect certain things to happen, and it's not just for, I mean, it helps improve my enjoyment, but I'm asking you to do a few small things so that you're going to enjoy it more too. Say hi, Biddy. Hello. Meow, meow, meow. Fluff, fluff, fluff. Onto the floor. Sorry, cat. Sorry, Louise. So, not really building off of that, but we're going to go over and build out, probably just through this one time, maybe through a couple times, a complete D&D character. Like if I were to start a campaign, this is how I would want to build a character. We're going to start out by picking our race. I'm going to go with dwarf. I'm going to go, because it's the first one in the book, and I'm going to go with Mountain Dwarf. So that's already telling me some stuff about my character. I have +2 to Constitution. I have +2 to Strength automatically off the bat. This is going to be a stout, hardy dwarf. Gamble Brimstone is going to be his name. So I actually named him for once. Like I said, I'm going to build this up, and instead of taking him straight to level 3, I am going to actually run through and probably level him up to level 5. However, when I do that, I'm going to do each level separately so we can see the progression, real progression of the character as he goes along. My name, Better. Hey, we could put that in for once. So we have some things about dwarves here. Like dwarves mature at the same rate as humans, but aren't considered young until they reach the age of 50. On average, they live to be about 350. I'm going to, not actually going to put that in place. I'm going to take a note of that. 50 to 350 age. And then we have like our size, 4 to 5 feet tall, about 150 pounds, I'm not going to jot that down quite yet. 25 feet of speed. Because we are a mountain dwarf, I thought we got improved dark vision, but apparently we don't. So we just have normal dark vision. 60 feet. Dwarven resilience. So that gives us advantage against being poisoned and resistance to poison damage. Am I actually spelling that right? Resistance. So, advantage against being poisoned means that if something attacks us, like a scorpion attacks us with its stinger, it's going to do damage from the stinger itself, but it's also going to do poison damage. So we can reduce the amount of poison damage we take by making a saving throw. We roll a d20, there's like some target number, say 12, we have to hit. So we're making a Constitution saving throw. Our Constitution modifier, let's say it's +3. So now we have our Constitution modifier of +3. We have to roll a 9 or higher. So 50% chance, basically, we're on a d20. But we get to roll 2 dice, and if somebody's done the math, I would have to find it again. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that, or it comes down to if you're rolling with advantage, on average, I think it's like 3 or 4 higher than if you're not rolling without for your end result. Now, obviously, that's not going to be completely true because sometimes that first roll, well, it's going to be true. Let's put it that way. Because if I'm not rolling without advantage, I roll the first time, I get a 14. I roll the next time, I get a 12. Roll the next time, I get an 8. Roll the next time, I get a 20. Roll the next time, I get a 1. Roll the next time, I get a 5. And it's all over the map. But if I pair those off together, I'm going to be on high, or average, English, hard. On average, I'm going to have a higher result each time because I'm taking the best out of 2 numbers. There's less likelihood that I'm going to get a natural 1 and have to stick with it. So, really useful. And resistance to poison is really nice as well. Resistance to any sort of damage means that you automatically cut it in half. So somebody tosses a poisoned orb that releases gas into the room, not filling the room, but just into like a little 15-foot area. And all of us have a chance to kind of make a Constitution saving throw against it. Again, I make my saving throw because I have advantage against being poisoned. Oh wow, that cannot be how you spell resilience. That is, English does not look normal to me today. So I make my saving throw, so my damage would be cut in half. However, I have resistance to poison damage, so I take that damage which was cut in half and cut it into half again. If that makes sense. So, really handy. So, along with that, we have a bunch of skills that we get. We have our languages. I always like to put the languages at the top. Common and Dwarvish. So one thing you'll see with these languages, and that you probably noticed if you watched the other videos, is there's Common. Common is the basic language for every D&D character. Now, elves in the woods might speak Elven or Elvish. Don't know which it is. Both are correct. I'm sure there's a spot to use it correctly. But they might speak Elvish to each other. Dwarves in the mountain might speak Dwarvish to each other, but they all know Common. Now, you don't have to play this way. Does it make sense that everybody knows Common? I mean, let's look at our world for an example. Especially in a world that is way more interconnected, not everybody speaks English, not everybody speaks Chinese, not everybody speaks Spanish. There are plenty of people that speak all of those languages, but not everyone does. And English in the US is different than the English that they speak over in England, which is different than the English they speak over in Australia. And the whole colloquial terms and stuff like that are really hard to translate across the board, and there will be stuff that you miss going over. So you can play a much more hardcore version of D&D where Common isn't a thing, or you know the Common for the area that you grew up in, and well, you can probably make a best guess. There are going to be some stuff that you miss, some subtleties and some clues that you miss when you're in a different area from where you are normally. So we have that. We have some weapon trainings that we get automatically. Battle axe, hand axe, throwing hammer, and war hammer. Very classic dwarven type of weapons. We have proficiency with light and medium armor. We can choose a tool proficiency. It doesn't mean that we have the tool, but we can choose a proficiency either being proficient with smith's tools, brewer's tools, supplies, or mason's tools. So are we good at forging armor, horseshoes, that sort of thing? Can we brew beer? Do we know our alcohol? And finally, mason's tools. Can we build buildings and stuff, work the stone? I'm going to go mason's tools. I would say that it might be the trickiest to work in out of all of those. You can use the smith's tools, like if something happens to your armor because you fail at something catastrophically, you can use your smith skills by going into a town, paying a blacksmith for some time in his shop. It's going to be cheaper than having him fix it, and you can just work on it and fix it yourself. Then we have the brewer's tools. Those are just the most fun out of the tools or supplies, because who doesn't want booze? You can go into a town and be like, hey, you're running low on beer. Oh, the person you know isn't here to make beer anymore. Well, let me make some beer for you. You instantly make a ton of friends. But I like mason's tools just because it's kind of interesting, and I think it would give a very interesting character trait for for my dwarf here, for Gamble Brimstone, where he is really curious about any stone-built house. Like, how is it made? What stone was used? Like, what mortar was used? Really interested in that because that's what he has some familiarity with as being a dwarf. Alright, finally, over here, stone cutting. So this is another reason why I wanted to do this. Whenever you make an intelligence history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. When making a history check about stonework, you double your proficiency bonus. Proficiency bonus. So there we are. We have our race. We have our name. I'm going to do the attributes next. So the strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. But I wanted to talk a little bit about being a dwarf, because that's something, it's something that is probably fairly often overlooked or brought straight into the stereotype. How do you play a dwarf? I'm not going to claim to be an expert. There's a podcast, Total Party Thrill, that has done some episodes on how to play different not as common races or non-human races, basically. But as a dwarf, there are plenty of things to think about. Like, especially as a mountain dwarf, I'm going to have like really strong ties to being underground. I mean, it's tropey. What is my opinion on being above ground? Do I get homesick for not being underground? Or am I curious about what it is? I can live to be 350. The average human lives to be, probably in a world like this, probably no more than 70. But before old age and just disease and everything else is going to get to them. So I live 5 times longer. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Wow. 5 times longer than a human. So playing from the experience of being a human, with grandparents, one who's 100 and one who's 99, both who are still alive, it's still 3 times longer than their lifespan. So what difference is that going to make in how I see stuff? Is a mountain dwarf and one with a high constitution, am I going to be like, oh, okay, well, this pressing thing for you humans that's going to really change the human world in the next few years, is that something that's really important to me? I'm going to live another 50, 60, 100, 200 years. Why is it a big deal to me? Convince me on why I need to help you. But let's go to the stats. Actually, let's go to the classes first. Because we have our barbarian, who's a warrior, a bard, who's kind of a storyteller, magician, a cleric, priestly champion, a druid is somebody who derives their magical powers from nature and kind of worships nature. We have a fighter, pretty straightforward. We have our monk, who I would say it's kind of like a ninja. It's kind of keeping yourself in perfect balance. We have the paladin, who's a fighter, but a fighter to a sworn cause, a sworn religious cause. Then we have our ranger, who's kind of at the outskirts of civilization, kind of keeping the wild safe, potentially. And then we have our rogue, sneaky, stealthy, not necessarily a scoundrel, but somebody who can have a penchant for using their skills in a little bit more of a sly way. We have a sorcerer who's a spellcaster. Magic comes from like bloodline. We have a warlock whose magic comes from a bargain, and we have a wizard whose magic is learned. So looking at our skills here, we're going to have a high number in strength and constitution, probably. But I'm not going to actually look in the book. They have like the primary stat that you would want. I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to fill this in how I want my dwarf to be. And this is going to be a dwarven wizard, I think. Or a dwarven sorcerer. Or a dwarven druid. So we're going to go a dwarven druid. So druids cast off of wisdom. I'm going to put the 15 in there for the +2. So let's talk about wisdom. What is wisdom? What does it mean for a D&D game? What differentiates wisdom from intelligence? I think in real life we can figure that out fairly quickly, but a quick way to say it is intelligence is book smarts. If you have a really high intelligence, you have read a lot and are good that way. If your wisdom is higher, it's not so much book smarts, it's more, okay, I can adjust and understand the situation on the fly. It's street smarts sort of thing. So let's go to our next skill, 16, in our constitution. Constitution, probably, there are a lot of them that are fairly straightforward for this, but I still want to talk about them a little bit. So constitution is like how hardy you are, like how likely are you to become sick. Case of a dwarf, how likely are you to become poisoned? How well can you hold your liquor? Stuff like that. So our next number is 13. And I'm actually going to put it here. There's a slightly strategic reason for doing so. At 4th level, every class increases an attribute, one of these main 6, by either 2 or 2 of them by 1. So I'm going to have the 15 and 15. I can put 1 into both of them and increase my wisdom and my strength. Now I could have put my 8 into my strength, but I didn't, and I actually went really high on strength for a class that doesn't need that much strength. Peanut butter kitty time, peanut butter kitty time. Alright, let her settle in. But it makes sense. I'm a dwarf. I'm going to be playing a different dwarf, different type of druid than normal. I'm not going to be, I don't know how to put it well. I'm going to be a very tough druid. I'm going to put my 10 into my dexterity. I have a 12 and an 8 left, but I could put the 12 into my dexterity. It's going to help with my initiative because I'd have a +1, but I feel like as a dwarf, like I'm fairly dexterous for a dwarf, at a 10. My plan is to make myself fairly short and stout. And so I'm built more like a bowling ball than I am a bowling pin. Sorry. Dexterity, a fairly straightforward skill again. This is what you're going to use when you want to jump over stuff, when you want to climb, like leap and grab onto a rope, when you're trying to make a catch of something being thrown at you. It's going to be dexterity. I'm going to put my 12 here because, well, I could put the 8 there, which would give an interesting role-playing option for how charismatic I actually am. I am going to find it easier to play a creature or somebody who's a little bit better than average charisma, not necessarily because I am in real life. I hope I'm fairly charismatic, otherwise these are going to be some pretty bad YouTube videos to watch, but it allows me to really play into social situations. I will point out that a lot of people, if I had put the 8 there, there would have been a lot of temptation to really step back in social situations. If you have a low charisma, don't step back in social situations. Play it like you would in a social situation. Let yourself get burned a couple of times based off of the fact that you're not good in these situations. You'll eventually learn to step back, but you're not always going to pick up on it, because somebody with a 10 or like a 8 or a 6 charisma, it doesn't mean that you don't try and talk to people. It just means that it doesn't necessarily always go quite as well as you'd want it to, because you're really awkward. A couple really good examples of this come from Critical Role. The first being Keyleth, who her character is meant to be socially awkward. It's kind of the best way to describe her character and how charismatic she is she's the type of person that doesn't quite know when to stop. So like she says 3 sentences and would be good, but then she has to say another 3 more, and it's like, oh no, honey, you threw it on too thick. Your semi-believable story is now not at all believable. And then there's another character. I cannot think of. Sorry, I have a cat in my lap who was nibbling at my finger. Cannot think of who he is. What's the character's name? It's the character who kisses Keyleth after their adventures with the Slayer's Take. So he does a low charisma score very differently. Again, he doesn't shy away from social situations. He's just very blunt. Like, instead of being kind of that cutesy awkward, Biddy, you have to go if you're going to play with me. He does the, no, you shouldn't have said that because you accidentally insulted this person, versus, yeah, sort of thing. So there are plenty of ways to play charisma, and your charisma is just kind of your ability to influence people, is what I would describe it as. Then we have our intelligence. Now this is the ideal one to put the -1 in, because that means when rolling stone cutting, any history check about stone, we're only getting a 3 currently. But it's still, I like the idea of that this dwarf, I think the story that I have in my mind kind of coming together is he has lived in the mountains, and I don't think he's really been a loner, but he's always been about expanding and exploring the caves, and that's where his masonry stuff comes in. Is like he really likes to make new caves, really likes to expand the dwarven cities, but he is not necessarily the smartest at it. He's just very passionate towards it. He'll think with his heart before he thinks with his head. Now, I will point out that these last three, we have our intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. These three are probably the hardest to play, the farther away from what, as a human, you would actually score. Like, my intelligence, probably average, a little bit above, to brag, but I mean, I'm a college graduate in computer programming, working in computer programming for a decade now. I know my stuff. And with that, I'm well read. So to play this 8 intelligence, how do I play an 8 intelligence if we come across a puzzle in a dungeon that's mathematically based, and I'm just fairly good at doing math stuff fast, or if it's like a brain teaser, and it's a brain teaser that I've heard before in real life, or something I can figure out in real life. How do I play that difference between my -1 intelligence on the character sheet and my own ability to figure stuff out, especially if we have a character who's has a 6 intelligence. Now, I can play it down pretty easily with just not answering. I'd be probably more apt to play it, especially if nobody else is getting it, the puzzle, getting the brain teaser, whatever the clue is. I'd be more apt to play it by, I'm going to give like 6 different answers. I'm going to be like, oh, is it a mouse? Is it a chicken? No, turtle. No, duck. Maybe it's a rat. Oh, could be a werewolf. Could be a dire rat. Well, let's say werewolf is the right answer. I mean, that was really out there from the other ones, but I didn't throw it in at the very end. I threw it in the middle, and it's like, okay, I threw out the correct answer. That's me personally knowing the answer to the riddle, but I threw it out as my character throwing out a whole bunch of different ideas. Hopefully for the other players, I'll be like, oh, werewolf. Yep, that makes perfect sense. So now we have to go over and do this thing. And that solves the puzzle. So I personally gave them the answer, but my character didn't give them the answer. That's kind of the trick between a lot of these skills in the intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, is to play that difference between who you actually are and your metagame knowledge versus what your character would know. And the opposite's really true as well. If I'm awkward, and I'm sure I'm quite awkward doing this stream, and my character had a charisma of 18, how do I balance that discrepancy between the fact that I personally don't have a charisma of 18? He's smoother than I am in what he can say and what he can do, and probably in what he looks like. The easiest way that I can play the difference between that is I say whatever I want to say, and then we roll the dice. Even though my charisma level might not be higher, we can use the dice, which are going to give a higher result on average, for persuasion, for performance, for intimidation, for deception than I could simply by being like, the dice show that difference there. It's not an ideal situation. It's a little bit trickier to play too. However, then we have our top three. Let's talk about strength, dexterity, and constitution. Those three are probably the easiest to play at any level, any number as well, because we know what an 18 dexterity looks like. We can watch the Summer Olympics and watch gymnastics. That's 18, 20 dexterity. Like, that's off the charts. We can watch a powerlifting competition and see what 20 strength looks like. We can see people do insane feats like pushing or pulling around train cars, stuff like that. Constitution. We have an idea of what constitution looks like. We don't have to actually really even see this one an example. It's just we know, oh, I can play somebody who doesn't get sick. How do I do that? I don't get sick. Oh, my constitution's 4. That never, ever, ever, no matter what race you are, have your constitution as 4. I'm sorry, slight tangent. But, oh, my constitution's 4. I get sick often. Like, if for playing a dwarf, I'm 328 years old. I have a constitution of 4. There's stuff out there that can just kill me because I'm really old and frail. Not a bad thing to play, not a bad way to play it, but the physical stats, so those top 3 are a whole lot easier to play against your type of like who you actually are as a person. The bottom 3 are trickier because even if I had a low charisma of like a -1, I'm still going to want to express myself as myself. However, with all these stats here, feel really free to go against who you are as a person, because doing so is going to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and it's going to kind of teach you about like how other people exist in real life. It's a really good way to step into something that you're not as familiar with, not as comfortable with, and be like, oh, I see how this works for someone. This is interesting. Like, this is different. This makes me see some people in a really different light, or people in a certain situation in a really different light, because I haven't been there before. So feel free to play around. I would recommend first time, play something that's fairly close to you. It doesn't have to be a long game, and I can't say for sure. I've just noticed in Dungeons and Flagons and the games before, Dungeons and Flagons, there's getting more stepping away from who they are in real life, but in many ways they still are playing towards themselves. And I think that's one of those things that the more you play, and we've only been playing for a year and a half now or so, excuse me, where the more you play, the more you're going to be able to explore other people by playing. So we're going to get to our class. Right now, we're level 1. We're going to put level 1. Our hit die is a D8. We start with a really nice 11 hit points. Very nice. We already have light armor and medium armor. We get that, and we get shield. The important thing with druids is that their armor cannot have metal in it. it has to be natural. So we have, I'm going to change this up. War, hammer, club, dagger, dart, javelin, mace, quarterstaff, scimitar, sickle, sling, and spear. So we are really quite proficient with a lot of different weapons. And to go along with our tool proficiencies, that area, we are proficient with an herbalism kit. So why would a mountain dwarf know a lot about herbs? My mountain dwarf, for his herbalism kit, is going to have stuff like algae, fungi, stuff like that you could find underground easily, and that's going to be what he's good at with that. We have our saving throws. So I'm just going to kind of go through what different saving throws are used for here. Strength saving throw, like if you're trying to hold on to something, that's the primary one. Poor dexterity, it's a 0. So dexterity saving throws are really common. So strength is not, dexterity is. It's for when you want to avoid something. Like if there's a spell that takes effect in an area, you can dodge out of its way. It's a save against it. Then we have Constitution. Constitution, poison, disease, that sort of thing. Intelligence. Intelligence is not a super common one. Intelligence is really used a lot for there are some spells that eat away at your brain, and sort of that sort of thing. But most common when you're doing something that's intelligence based is going to be wisdom. So our wisdom of +4 is nice, because that probably puts us in range for the first few levels of just needing to roll an 8 or higher, so better than 50% chance that we make it. Wisdom is for a lot of those mental things again. It's like the common one to resist mental attacks, or frightening things, or illusions, being able to see through them, stuff like that. And then charisma. Charisma isn't used a ton either, but that one comes down more so to checks about often opposed like social roles, where if somebody is trying to deceive you and you're trying to persuade them, you can play those off against each other. And we get to choose 2 skills from Arcana, Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, and Survival. I'm going to do Survival and Perception. Both of those are Survival isn't necessarily used all that often. I like to use it fairly often, especially when in the wilderness, to be like, okay, you're wandering around, can you find where you're trying to go? And we have a nice passive perception of 14. Perception is great. That's kind of your general looking around a room. Not charisma. I saw the charisma on intimidation, but I was going to be looking at investigation. Is one that is really tempting. Just to see what we can get. Just to see and be able to find traps, be able to loot a body, stuff like that. be able to find clues, what's going on. So perception is the bigger, I have the ability to take in the whole picture, whereas investigation is just focused. I'm looking at this one thing, tell me everything about it. That sort of thing. So let's add another language. We know Druidic. There's a squirrel going along the side of the house, and the cats are both really excited. So I'm going to skip one thing in here, which you'll notice, or won't notice, but there's, if you remember from previously, the characters I've created, there is equipment. I'm not going to use the default equipment. The only piece that I'm going to take from it is my Druidic focus, and it's a small black gemstone. That's my Druidic focus. It's something that's could have been in my family for years. It's generations even. It's something that, whoa, I'm tired, it's been a long week. Something that is more precious to me and doesn't really cost that much. Like, I can maybe sell it for 5 or 6. Oh, I can maybe sell it for 40 or 50 gold pieces, but it has a sentimental value of way, way more than that for me. So let's talk about spellcasting, and we'll go to the spellcasting page for spellcasting. Spellcasting class is Druid. It's a little redundant, but it's a nice little reminder of what we're doing. Our spellcasting ability is Wisdom, spell save DC. So 8 plus proficiency of 2 is 10, plus our Wisdom modifier is 12. And finally, our spell attack bonus is our proficiency plus our Wisdom modifier of plus 4. These are fairly low numbers, but I'm going to be playing kind of a little bit of a different Druid here. And so at this point, I know 2 first level, or I know Wisdom modifier plus Druid level, so I know 3 spells. They have to be first level, plus I know 2 cantrips. So let's talk a little bit about Druid spells here. Druids, bards, paladins, and clerics all have this nifty little ability where they have access to their whole spell library. They know every single spell. However, at the beginning of every single day, they choose their specific spells. So we're still at level 1. We're going to flip back to our Druid spells, and let's talk about what spells I want. I have 2 cantrips, so we can remove that, and I want Produce Flame and Mending. So this time I'm going to read through and tell you what these different spells do, so we can talk about the different aspects of a spell. So Mending as a spell, they tell you the type of spell it is, especially for a wizard class. It is a transmutation cantrip. The casting time for this spell is 1 minute. It means I have to be able to focus on this for 1 minute of uninterrupted time. The range is touch. I have to be able to touch it. And just flipping back a few pages here, because I want to make sure I get what each letter stands for correct in here. Oh, there we are. So this requires what they call components, and it has 3 different types of components: V, S, and M. So V is verbal. Like this, you have to be able to speak to cast mending. S is somatic. You have to be able to gesture or touch to cast this spell. M is for materials. This requires 2 lodestones. And it does not say that it uses up both lodestones, so if they're not consumed by the spell, I can use the same 2 lodestones over and over and over again. So let's see what mending does. This spell repairs a single break or tear in an object you touch, such as a broken chain link, 2 halves of a broken key, a torn cloak, leaking wineskin. As long as the break and tear is no larger than 1 foot in dimension, you mend it, leaving no trace of the former damage. The spell can physically repair magic items or a construct, but cannot restore magical abilities to it. That would be way too powerful, but it's a really handy spell to have, and for my mason builder druid dwarf, it makes a lot of sense. So let's look at produce flame. And this is where I'm going to call out something of what I'm doing here. Produce flame. 1 action. The range is yourself. It requires verbal and somatic components only. It does not eat up any material of any sort, and it lasts 10 minutes. A flickering flame appears in your hand. The flame remains there for the duration and harms neither you nor your equipment. The flame sheds bright light for 10 feet and light for an additional 10. The spell ends if you dismiss it as an action or if you cast it again. You can attack with the flame, although doing so ends the spell. When you cast the spell, or as an action on a later turn, you can hurl the flame at a creature within 30 feet of you. Make a ranged spell attack, and on a hit, it takes 1d8 fire damage. So, what you can tell about these first 2 spells that I've picked here, neither are really offensive spells. Produce Flame can be, and I kept it so it could be a spell that I could use, but Mending is not an offensive spell. So, let's go look at the Druid first level spells. And you're gonna see this trend continue with Create or Destroy Water. Fairy Fire. And Detect, I don't have Identify as a spell, do I? Detect Magic. So I can create or destroy water, which, believe it or not, can be used as an offensive spell. But it's a very handy spell. Makes a lot of sense for a dwarf to have that, especially if I had had smith's tools instead. Fairy Fire. Fairy Fire is just a good all-purpose spell. It Any creature in the area you cast it has to make a dexterity saving throw. Only DC 12, so not that hard to make. But if they fail, they have a ring of fire around them, and everybody has advantage to hit them. And finally, detect magic does what it says it does. It detects if there's magic in the area. And I do want to read through Create and Destroy Water with you to just see what it does and see how it could be an interesting spell to pick. So it's one action, a range of 30 feet, verbal, somatic, and materials. It requires a drop of water or a few grains of sand if you're destroying it. If you create water, you create up to 10 gallons of clean water within range in an open container, or let it fall as rain, and you can use it to extinguish flames. If you destroy it, you can destroy up to 10 gallons of water in an open container within range. Alternatively, you can destroy fog within 30-foot range. When you cast this spell using higher level slots, you destroy 10 gallons of water per additional slot. If you're fighting a fire elemental, really good. If you're fighting a water elemental, really good. So there we have our druid spells. Now let's go back here and we're going to do our background. And hopefully this will be visible, and I have to zoom out a little bit for you. Oh man. Our background is going to be a guild artisan. We've been building stuff our whole life, and that's kind of what we're basing everything off of that we do. So we're a guild artisan. In particular, we are a mason. That gives us advantage or proficiencies in insight. We can read people, and persuasion. We can talk people into doing stuff. Kind of a fun range of skills there. Really two fun ones to add. And we get to learn another language of our choice. We're learning Gnomish. Elvish, way more sense. Every fantasy thing, you're going to run into more elves than gnomes. However, Gnomish makes a lot of sense. There are rock gnomes, so that's what we're going to go with. Then we have guild membership. As an established and respected member of your guild, you can rely on certain benefits that membership provides. Lodging and food at guild locations. Trouble with crimes, and dues of 5 gold pieces per month. It's a fun one in that you get a really good benefit. Being able to help you get out of trouble, or being able to use their political clout. I realize that is not currently readable. Let's scroll one. Is a really handy thing to have. I'm going to zoom out a couple times here, I think is what I have to do. sorry. This might be a little bit small at this point to read, but I wanted you to be able to see most of personality traits. So, personality traits, you can pick your own characteristics. But a lot of them there are some really good ones. So for personality traits, they say that you can pick one or two. I like the idea of picking a couple, and for the personality traits, that I believe that anything worth doing is worth doing right, and then I'm well known for my work and want people to appreciate it. I'm proud of what I can do. So then we have a bunch of different ideals. And the ideals are interesting in the fact that after most of them, there is a bracket. And the bracket gives you the choice of like lawful, good, chaotic, evil, or neutral. And then there's one without one that can help you figure out your alignment. I'm going to be a lawful neutral. I'm quite proud. And my ideals are aspiration. I work hard to be the best there is at my craft. So this one, the ideals can really help you shape your alignment. And I will go into alignment later, just to know kind of how it works. It works in a tic-tac-toe style grid. You start in the top corner with lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good. Then it's lawful neutral, neutral neutral, or true neutral, and chaotic neutral. And there's lawful evil, neutral evil, or chaotic evil. I will definitely go into more detail on those later. I just want to finish up the bonds and flaws at this point. So my bond is, I like this one. I pursue wealth to secure someone's love. That one is a lot of fun in that it's like everything that it sounds like, where I believe anything worth doing is worth doing right. I'm well known for my work and people appreciate it. I work hard to be the best at my craft. I pursue wealth to secure someone's love. I'm going to actually change that. I pursue fame. Like, that's what I'm after. I want people to know who I am, because maybe it's some dwarven royalty, maybe it's some other race's royalty that I saw in passing and just immediately fell in love with. But now I have to get them to notice me. And so I'm still pushing to be the best that I can be. And we have our flaws. There are a couple different ones. Or like 3 different ones that I see being possible. One of them that I'm rejecting that is pretty good. Sorry, I have to sneeze. That was probably really loud. Apologies for that. One of them that is good, but I'm going to reject, is I would kill to acquire a noble title. It doesn't quite make sense. I mean, it does slightly, with the story that I'm creating, but that's not really the notoriety that I seem like I'd be going for. Another one is I'm horribly jealous of anyone who can outshine my handiwork. Everywhere I go, I'm surrounded by rivals. Really good if I'm a perfectionist and constantly judging myself. But I like to think I have a little bit of ego on me, so I'm going to go with I'll do anything to get my hands on something rare or priceless. Like, I am super confident in my work, and I want other people to see it, and I have to do the best work possible, so I'm always looking out for the best things possible to be able to do that work. So let's talk a little bit right now about equipment. And we can talk about, I think this section covers a few other things as well. No, just equipment. And let me pull something up here really quick. Welcome to Wizards of the Coast Dice Roller. Why am I doing this? Because I need to roll 2d4. Ooh, that sucks. So we're going to take the average out of 5 for truly random. So we have 3, 7, 7, 5, 5. I'll actually pull up something else here. Yes, calculator. I could probably get fairly close in my head, but 3 plus 7 plus 7 plus 5 plus 5, 27 divided by 5, 5.4. So I'm going to round down, do the honorable thing. It's close, I could round it up, but I'm going to round down, and by rounding down, I get 5. I have 50 gold pieces to spend on equipment as my druid self. I'm going to spend 10 gold pieces on leather armor. I'm going to spend 15 gold pieces on a warhammer. So let's do the math. So that's 25. I've cut my amount in half at this point in time. I'm going to buy 2 hand axes. That counts another 10. And then I'm going to use the wonderful little equipment packs. I'm going to buy an explorer's pack. So I just want to double check. Let's see how much does a shield cost? 10 gold pieces. I could buy 1 hand axe and get a shield. I don't feel like my guy would have a shield. Warhammer is very traditional dwarven. Hand axe makes sense as well. So let's just fill out these stats. Both of them are going to be done off of strength, my better skill, plus 4 to hit with both of them since I'm proficient with both of them. Hand axe down here. Let's see, highlight. And then warhammer down here. The warhammer does 1d8 bludgeoning, 1d8 plus 2 bludgeoning, and it's going to be warhammer two-handed, which is how I'm going to be using it most of the time, is 1d10 plus 2 bludgeoning. My hand axe is only 1d6 plus 2 slashing. And I'm going to write a note down here. Hand axe can be thrown up to 60 feet. Hand axe. Okay, so now we have those two out of the way. I have my spellcasting ability. I have my leather armor. Now, I could go with padded armor, which gives you disadvantage on stealth checks for an extra 10 or 5 gold back into my coffer, but I want to just do straight leather armor, which is 11 plus my dexterity. I have an armor class of 11. That's probably not going to get that much higher until I start improving my dex somehow. So, at this point in time, I'm going to spend some time right here. Let's do some of this back here right now. It's at the beginning of the personalities and background section. We have handy little charts to figure out how tall and how heavy we are. Hopefully that works. We're going to be 112. Eyes are going to be green. Skin, fair. Hair, sandy brown. So our height, we actually get to go back to this roller back here. And we're going to do the same thing again. We need 2d4. We're going to roll 5 times again and take the average. So 5, 6, 6, 8, 8. Ooh, we're going to be pretty tall. 5, 6, 6, 8. But we're not going to actually be pretty tall because I said I wanted to be short. So I'm going to pick this. They have the ability for you to randomly figure this out. If I take the shortest, I can be 4 foot 5 inches. With this roll, I could have been a high of 4 foot 8 inches. My weight, the base weight for a mountain dwarf is 130 pounds. Then I'm supposed to randomly calculate it. I'll reset this again. Using my 5 from my previous d4, I get to roll 2d6. 9, 3, 7, 7, 9. 18, 28, 35. So 7 is really my average. Huh. Yeah, 7 is my average. So I would do 7 times 5, which is 35, as we just established as I did that math down. So I would be 165 pounds. I am short and stocky and strong. It's kind of fun to roll it just to see what you get. And remember, when rolling stuff, rolling is really actually very handy, especially with the backgrounds or like your looks here, because you can roll. If you get something you don't like, don't keep it. Roll something different. Roll it again and see what you get. Or be like, oh, this doesn't make sense with my story. Let's see what happens. All right, this is over an hour right now. I'm gonna come back tomorrow and we're gonna write some backstory. I've kind of given a little bit of an idea for it. We're gonna roll for trinkets, which is kind of fun. Let's see, does their die roller have it? Oh yeah, we can roll our D100s. And that's going to give us different trinkets across the board. So, let's see, pull up one thing here. So I'm ready to stop this stream. So that is going to be it for today. Peace.